G'day everyone and welcome back to another episode of Practical Powerlifting. If you're watching the YouTube version of this, you'll see that I'm not at home. I'm actually at the gym, and I thought I would do a live episode at the gym. I don't know, thought I'd mix things up. So the audio quality might not be what it normally is at home, so I hope if you're listening to the audio only version that it is pleasant enough and it works. This is the second episode of 2026, and so we're a couple of weeks into the year, or a couple of weeks into January. People are coming back out of their breaks, coming back to work, getting back into routines. Silly season is nearly over, depending on how you define it. If you're a student, you've probably still got a couple more weeks before you got to go back to school. But if you're working full time, you're most certainly back at work now. Today's episode, as you can see by the title, we're talking about going off program. And I just want to talk a little bit more deeply about what a program even is and the role that a program has in your strength training. When people start getting into strength training, start going to the gym, they often don't follow a program, right? They often just go to the gym and figure it out. And I mean, many people do that for a very long time. Then some people never follow a program. They just go to the gym. And those people still make gains. They still get stronger. They still get bigger. Arguably not as much progress as they could otherwise, but that is to say that they still make progress. And so it then begs to reason, well, what is the purpose of a program? What is the purpose of programming and planning in general? Well, I would define the purpose of a program is to give us, one, some structure so we know what we're working towards. Another major reason that we're writing programs is to make sure that we're not missing anything. You know, it's very easy if you're kind of making stuff up to fall victim to your own biases and not notice that there are gaps in your weekly routine, or if you're not following a routine, in your weekly training load, I suppose. So for example, you might have the best intentions and think that you're trying to cover your whole body, but subconsciously those biases are expressed, and as a result you're maybe not training your back as much as you probably could or should be, or maybe you're not training your legs as much as you could or should be, or some other kind of deficit arises. Whereas when you're physically writing out your program, you can have a look at the program and say, and count up, okay, how many sets of legs am I doing in a week? How many sets of triceps am I doing in a week? Oh, I'm doing 20 sets of triceps. That seems like a lot. And I'm only doing 5 sets of biceps. Whereas if you're not writing a program, you might not even notice that for a very long time. So a program is used to give us a bit of a plan. It's used to cross-check that we're not missing anything. It's also a way of just keeping us motivated, giving us something to work towards, giving us an idea of the direction that we're going in. And I know a lot of people struggle to exercise or go to the gym without a program because they kind of feel like they're spinning their wheels. Now, I mentioned at the start that there are some people that never follow a program, but there are some people that are the other way around, where, as an example, after a competition, it is often that I will not give someone a program immediately. I'll say, hey, we're going to go a week, no program, come into the gym, do a bit of light exercise, but it feels good. I want you to have a mental break from the rigors of following a program, and then they just don't come. Or they do come and they're a bit lost and they don't know what to do. And they say to me, they'll verbalize things like, without a program, I just got no idea what to do. I feel like I can't work out unless I've got something written down. And so it can be very helpful to motivate and to give us purpose in what we're doing. Now, specifically this episode, I'm talking a little bit more about going off program. And the reason I want to talk about this is because the larger principle by which I look at programs is that they are a plan or a suggestion, I suppose, in many ways. Now, your training being a suggestion is a very deep idea. The reason I say so is when I write someone a program, I am not obligating them to do it. And no one should feel obligated to do what a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper, or more realistically on an app or a screen says. They're just a bunch of numbers and a bunch of words. And when a coach writes a program, they are writing this as a suggestion. You come to me with these goals, and this is what I suggest you do to get there. Now, this isn't the only way to get there, and it might not even be the best way to get there, but this is my suggestion as the path to take. And it can often be helpful to think of, or as an analogy, think of your program as a little bit like a route. You know, you go into a new bar that you've never been to, or go to a friend's house where you've never been to their house before, and you put it into Google Maps or Waze or Apple Maps, hopefully Google Maps. And sometimes Google Maps will give you multiple routes, right? There'll be multiple ways to get there. And you've got to pick one. And you pick the route, and that's the way that you're going to get there. Similarly, a program is that. It is a suggested path, it's a suggested route towards the goals that you would like to achieve. But importantly, you are not obligated. And at no point are you obligated to follow that route or to follow that path. And so when we think of your program as a bit of a plan or a route, then the analogy can actually be spread out a little bit and can be built upon. And that's going to take us to, I guess, my main point of today, which is that in the same way that your route should change based on new information, so should your training plan be updated based on new information. For example, you're on the way to this bar or to your friend's house, and there is a car accident on the road that you're on. You do not simply blindly drive through that traffic accident, or you do not blindly sit in traffic behind hundreds of cars that are stuck behind this traffic. You will opt for a different route. You will either look on your map, or if you know the roads relatively well, you might divert onto a side street and adapt your way to get to the same goal. When Google Maps gave you that route, it did so with a certain amount of information. You punched that in half an hour ago when you left home. But half an hour later, new information has arisen, new circumstances or new information is now available that forces you to change your route, or that should prompt you to change your route. Similarly, when we write a training program, we're writing that program for weeks in advance, months in advance sometimes. And we're writing it with the current information. So if I write you a program today, I'm writing it based on what I know about you today, what I know about your goals are today, what I expect for the next few weeks. But as those weeks transpire, as the sessions occur, new information will come to light. Niggles will arise. You might get sick. Your goals might change. A new work project might come in. Any plethora of things will come up. And many of those things are significant enough to cause or to prompt deviations from the plan. Like if you've got a new work project at work, that might not actually affect the way that you train. But if after 3 weeks of this program, you find that every time you go do front squats, the next day your back is toasted and you can't deadlift, then it would be partly idiotic to continue on this plan, which you have slowly come to realize doesn't work. It'd be like driving on a road to see that it's covered in glass shards and you continue to drive on that road instead of thinking, well, something's going wrong here. I'm going to deviate. I'm going to detour onto a side street. Of course, if there is shattered glass across the road, you would change your path. And so similarly, if you notice things in your program that are signs that you should be doing something different, then you need to listen to those signs. And you need to understand that when the program was written, it was written with a certain set of understandings at the time. When I write someone a program and 3 weeks later they get sick and they try to finish the program as it is, to me, that is so bleedingly obvious a place where you should be making adjustments. And this has happened so many times where, someone will be sick, they'll do the program, the week of training will be freaking terrible. And I've had this conversation where I say, when I wrote your program 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, you weren't sick. And I wasn't expecting you to be sick. So the context with which I wrote the program was, you will not be sick in week 4, and so this is what you will do. But now that you are sick, this is a different set of circumstances. Like if I wrote your program week to week or day to day, and I found out you were sick this week, or if I knew you were going to be sick somehow, then I would have factored that into your program. A good example of this would be like, let's say you've got a client who is about to start a new program, but in week 4 of the program, they're going on a work trip where they're going to be getting drunk every day, right? So any reasonable coach would write 3 weeks of normal training. And then in that 4th week, when you know they're going to be away, it might be scaled back, maybe 2 sessions instead of 4 sessions, maybe write the whole week off completely. But let's say they scale back from 2 sessions to 4 sessions. And then the week after, it's back to the 4 sessions per week. That is you literally factoring in the information that you currently have into the program. Okay, week 4, they can only train twice instead of 4 days for that week. So I'm going to factor that into the program. Now, a work trip or, maybe a procedure or a surgery that you've got coming up, or you're going to move house, or these other kinds of disruptive type things in your life, we know they're coming. And so we can plan that in your training. But being sick, we don't know when you're going to be sick. And so just because we didn't know that you were going to be sick doesn't mean that shouldn't be factored into your training. It's just that we have to factor it in as we go. We can't wait until, we can't plan for it ahead of time. It's like if I knew that there was going to be a traffic jam, then I wouldn't go that way. But I've gone this way now. Now there is a traffic jam. And so I'm going to have to deviate. I'm going to have to make changes. I understand that a lot of lifters feel a sense of devoutness, or they want a feeling of completion. For the sake of completion, I want to do my program. I want to be a diligent athlete. I want to do what's right. I want to cross every T and dot every I. And so they want to finish their program no matter what. Now, for a lot of you that are listening to this, maybe you're not like that. Maybe you've got a rubber arm and any excuse to skip an accessory or to skip a training day you'll take. But for a lot of people, they're not like that. For a lot of people, they're so stubborn in their attempt to be perfect and complete. And in many ways, that is a great strength, because it does encourage and force, I suppose, lifters to train in a way that is, of a high standard. I understand you want to live to a high standard, but I think where people go wrong with this is that they allow this obsession, and I use the term obsession strongly, but they allow this obsession with being complete to interfere with good judgment on the fly. And that's what it really takes to get the most out of your training, because the training that I wrote 4 weeks ago, in some ways, is expired. That's old news. It's like using old software. I wrote the program for you 4 weeks ago, but we're training today. An example conversation I have is I'm in the gym and someone's doing their 4th week or their 5th week. They're doing something, and I make a change to the program. And I say, look, I know your program says to do 3 sets of 5 at 100. Instead, though, I want you to, we're not even going to do these squats. Instead, we're going to do tempo squats, and we're just going to work at 80 kilos. We're going to do 3 sets of 3. And they said, well, what about my 3 sets of 5? And I go, well, we're not going to do that today, because I really want to work on this technical thing I can see that you're doing wrong. And they say, okay, so should I do my 3x5 tomorrow? I go, no. They go, okay, but it's on my program. And I want to kind of grab them by the head. I'm like, your program was written by me. I am the program. Like, that program is outdated information. That was written a month ago. I'm watching you right now in real life, and my most up-to-date version of your program is what I'm telling you to do right now, because this is what I am seeing as what we need to work on. And if you understand the fact that I wrote your program a month ago, it is also me that is talking to you right now. It is the same source. It's just the plan that I wrote for you a month ago, with the new information that we've come to light more recently, we're making changes on. And so my recommendation to you is to have some flexibility, to have an ability to think critically and consider what it is that you're doing as you do it. Is to be a little bit skeptical and think, okay, is what I'm doing the right thing to be doing? How is my body responding to this? Does the plan need to change? The way I think of it is, like, if I drew a 5-week program, every week along that program becomes slightly less relevant the further into the future it goes. If you were around powerlifting 10 years ago, 12 years ago, especially 20 or 30 years ago, really long-term programs were a thing. 16-week preps, 12-week preps, 16-week preps. I've even seen 24-week preps, 6-month preps, where coaches and athletes, I'm talking like Ed Cohen days, Grant Lamar, these guys would write like 24-week programs, 24-week preps, so far in advance. And I used to do that. I used to write 12-week programs at a time, or 3 monthly. And I quickly stopped doing that. And the longest I'll write a program now is like usually 6 weeks, sometimes 7. Usually 6 is the longest. More often than not, my programs are 5, and oftentimes my programs are even 4 weeks long. And the reason is because so much new information is going to come to light over this next month that to think you can plan that far ahead is a little bit silly. Now, don't get me wrong. If I've got a motivated athlete that I know is consistent, and they're going to be competing in 6 months' time, right? Let's say it's currently January, and I've got someone that wants to compete in July. I might map out a general idea, a general structure, exercises I want to include at certain times, things that I want to work on at the right time, loose skeleton of what's going on. Maybe in the meantime, I know they're going on a 1-week holiday to Bali, and so I'm going to put that into the calendar. But I'm not writing out the entire program for 6 months, because as any experienced coach will know, they've written programs months in advance, and then 3 weeks later, their lifter breaks their leg. And so you spent 2 hours of a Sunday writing a program only for it to all be irrelevant now because your lifter's got an injury, or any other plethora of things have happened or changed that make the program that you've written sort of irrelevant. And so while that's true on a very broad scale, like a 24-week scale, a 6-month scale, the same is true on a very micro scale, like even zoomed into as little as a week. You might get your program written on Monday, so it's fresh, it's brand new. But by Wednesday, something may have happened that causes you, or that should prompt you, to be willing to make changes to your program on the fly. Now, it's less, of course, likely, because the shorter this time frame, the less likely there are things that are going to come up that are going to interfere. Of course, if you break your leg, then you're going to need to make changes to your program. But the longer scale that you're looking at, the smaller the thing can be that would be enough to justify changing the things in your program. So again, if someone's got a 24-week program, then on week 3 or week 4 or week 5, even minor things like, oh, this exercise isn't jiving well for me, or my elbows have started to hurt that they never used to hurt before, that's already a clue that if you keep doing this for 24 weeks, something's going to go wrong. And so you're going to have to make changes. So the likelihood that anything 24 weeks out is going to be accurate is so low that it's not worth writing for. So I think in practical terms, like for any coach that's real coach writing real programs, I think the most practical approach is to write programs 4 to 6 weeks at a time, which is what I think most people are doing. And that's what we refer to as a block. That's what I do. I refer to them as a block. But the bigger takeaway from all of this is that you should be willing to make those changes on the fly, even within the week. Now, the ideal situation is that you are training with your coach there in person, so you can make those changes on the fly. I refer back to, and I know that's not very common. I know most people train online, where they only actually interact with their coach remotely, or they might only see their coach once a week or once a fortnight in person. If you're lucky enough to train in a place where you can have a coach watch you all the time, that's the best situation for this, somewhere like TSF. I refer back to a seminar that Boris Shako did many years ago, where he was talking about his programming style. And if you're not familiar, Boris Shako is a very famous Russian powerlifting coach. A lot of his programs were load prescribed. So there'd be percentages and specific loads that lifters would have to perform. And a lot of it was fixed, no RPE. And this was before RPE training was very popular. This was before auto-regulation became a thing, or became very popular. Anyway, a lifter in the seminar asked him, how do you auto-regulate during training? And he said, what do you mean? Because how do you have lifters adjust the training loads based on how things are going at the time? And he said, they don't. The coach does that. Because it's a very Russian thing to have a coach there watching the lifters as they go. Auto-regulation itself is a form of what I'm saying. Auto-regulation is adjusting based on new information. So, if you're following a load prescribed program where you have to do 3 sets of 5 at 100 kilos, that's like prescribed. Whereas if you follow a program that says 3 sets of 5 at RPE 7, that's admitting that we don't know how things are going to be at the time. So you've got to be willing to auto-regulate up or down in order to get the most out of your training at the time that you're doing it. I think the best approach is somewhere in the middle, where you say 3 sets of 5 at 100 plus or minus 5 kilos. And that way the lifter on the fly is able to make those changes. But those changes can also be throughout the week, like I said earlier. So you're supposed to do squats on Saturday, but on Friday, one of your buddies asks you to go fill in for him on your local netball team. So you played 40 minutes of netball on Friday night, and then you get to Saturday and your legs are cooked. Now, when I wrote your program, I didn't know your legs were going to be cooked on Saturday. And had I known that, I might not have given you your main squats on Saturday. So using your brain, ideally you'd ask your coach, but again, your coach isn't always there. You might say, shouldn't have probably played netball on the Friday night. My program didn't factor that in, but I have a brain. I'm going to factor that in right now. So I'm not going to do my squats today. I'm going to do my squats on Sunday. That is a very easy example of you going off program, because your program was to do it on Saturday, going off program and adjusting your program to suit the new information that has come about. Or maybe you're supposed to do 4 sets of squats and you just do 3 sets of squats. And then go, hey coach, I know I was going to do 4, but considering how much fatigue my legs are carrying, I thought I would adjust it on the fly and do 3. Now, of course, there'll be some coaches that disagree with me. Some coaches that say, no, I don't want my lifters doing that kind of stuff. To them, I would say taking away autonomy from lifters is probably not the right approach. And in fact, we should be empowering lifters to feel like they can make those changes on the fly. They can adapt. They can use their brain, and they can adjust accordingly and experiment with their own body and understand their own body. And so I want my lifters to feel like they have the empowerment, or they have the capacity to make those changes so that they're best able to do training that suits them as things happen. I think about running personal training sessions, like a one-on-one personal training session. The ideal situation is I do that 4 days a week with the same individual. Like, imagine someone could afford to pay a personal trainer or a private coach, a one-on-one every session. So the coach is watching every session. If I was doing that, I would never write programs. Like, I would never write that personal program, because I would write the program internally, but I would almost never share it, because the program is so fluid. I'm just going to adjust it based on how things are going as they happen, because you've got so much contact. You've got so many contact points. But the practical reality is we don't see our clients that much. It's more of a once a week, once a fortnight type of thing. Now, as a beginner, this is very hard to apply because a beginner doesn't have the intuition to know what's right or where should I make these changes. Now, there's some things that are like, I guess, logical and more theoretical on paper. So, for example, if you're sick, maybe reduce your volume. If a niggle has arisen, maybe make swaps to the exercise if necessary, or again, drop the volume or drop the intensity. If you're responding particularly poorly to an exercise, you might need, like when I say poorly, I mean like, yeah, it's causing pain. You might make a swap. Those things are more theoretical, but there are much deeper things that require much more intuition, and that can only really be done once you're advanced. I write my own programs, and I'm often making changes as I go. I'm often skipping exercises, changing exercises, especially when it comes to accessories. Listening to my body, making swaps, making adjustments based on every day that's happening. I'll give you an example. Recently, on my week 3 of a program, I was doing my main deadlift session, and my adductor started seized up like a motherfucker. I did my top set. I did my last warm up. I did my top set, and adductor seized up like 10%. I was like, oh, that's weird. I dropped down. Adductor seized up like 30%. I was like, oh god, that's not good. And so I abandoned the rest of the workout. I had 6 sets of deadlifts to do. I only did 2, and I skipped the last 4. Why did I think that was happening? Well, I was in week 3 of a program, so I'd already completed 2 full weeks of training. And in this new program, I've been doing sumo deadlifts twice a week. So this is my 5th sumo session in 2.5 weeks, essentially. And this is the first time I've had this adductor kind of seizing up, cramping sensation. I've never experienced this before. And so I concluded that the only logical explanation for this was the fact that I've been doing sumo twice a week. So when I got to my 2nd sumo session for the week, I bailed on that, and instead I did some stiff leg deadlifts, conventional stance. When it came to week 4, I did my sumo deadlift as normal, no issues. Literally got through the whole session fine. And in week 4, instead of doing my 2nd sumo session, I continued what I did the week prior, and I did my stiff leg conventional deadlifts. On my program, like written down on my program, it told me to do sumo. But I am my program. I wrote my program, like I said earlier. So I override what the program says based on new information that's arisen. It is week 3. My adductors are cramping. My conclusion or my assessment is it's because of this. So I'm making a change to my program. I'm not going to stubbornly follow the program that I wrote 3 weeks ago because I'm supposed to, because I'm a good athlete and I'm going to do what my program says. I wrote the program. So now I say something different and I'm going to follow that instead. And so that's the kind of empowerment that I want you as an athlete to have, is to feel like you can make those changes on the fly based on things that are happening. Now, of course, as always, consult your coach. There should be an open dialogue of communication. Sorry, it's a little bit windy. There should be some open dialogue of communication there. Consult your coach. Hey, this is going wrong, or I'm feeling this sensation. I don't know if I really think this exercise is that helpful, or whatever it might be. Maybe halfway through, it can be even things that are like not even related to your actual training, but more about what's applied in your training. So for example, normally your Wednesday session's like 2 hours long, but halfway through a program, you signed up to some after work program thing, and now you're staying back at work for an hour, and now you don't have much time to train. You don't have 2 hours to train. So don't just stubbornly stay at the gym till 10 p.m. because that's what your program says. Take that to your coach and say, hey, I'm not going to have enough time to do my whole Wednesday session. Can I make my Wednesday session shorter and instead make up this session somewhere else in the week? And if so, how do I do that? Okay, and a good coach will oblige and will adapt the program accordingly. This wasn't about your physical experience of training. This was about your practical experience of your training. This is about how you actually get your training done around the rest of your week. And so do not be afraid to go off program. Do not be afraid to adjust your program as necessary, because your program is just a plan. It's just a suggestion. It's not an obligation. And your program should be adjusting as the weeks flow, as the days flow, based on new information that arises. Thanks for your attention, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Practical Powerlifting. If you made it this far, maybe send me a DM. Let me know that you've enjoyed it, because sometimes I feel like I'm just talking to nobody. I've really been enjoying this project. I've really enjoyed this episode. This has been a good one, I think. And so let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts on this general piece, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.